Well, it's a good question because, beer is one of the few sort of major foods people eat on a day-to-day basis, drink on a day-to-day basis, that your average person has not the slightest idea what beer is. So I think you do need to start at the beginning. Traditional beer is usually made from barley malt. And barley malt is barley, which is a grass like wheat, and it's sprouted. You take the seeds, they're soaked in water, and they're sprouted. And this is done by a company or a person known as a maltster. They're making malt out of barley. You sprout the malt for a few days, and what happens is that enzymes develop inside the seed, which are going to be used by the plant to convert starches into sugars, burn the sugar for energy, get the leaves out, become a plant. Well, we interrupt the process a few days in, drain the water off, put it in a kiln, and dry it. That's barley malt. Malt's a varietal like wine grapes, dozens of varieties, different flavors, etc. But the important part here is those enzymes, because the enzymes are going to break down the starches into sugars in a porridge called the mash. So we're going to crush the malt, mix it with hot water. At very specific temperatures, the enzymes are activated. They break down all the starch into sugars. So we start off with this starchy porridge, but we finish with a sugary porridge. And then at that point, we have to separate the sweet liquid, which is called the wort, away from essentially the chaff, which we call spent grain, or it's the husk that's on the barley. And that process happens in a vessel with a set of screens at the bottom. We spray hot water down on top of the grain bed, rinse all the sugars away from the grain husk. The husk goes off and becomes cattle feed, and now we have our sweet liquid, which is the wort. We bring that to a boil, we add hops, and the hop is a little artichoke-shaped flower about that big. It grows on a vine, in this country largely in the Pacific Northwest, but also in other temperate areas around the world. The hops give us bitterness in the beer, which is the backbone of the beer. Also gives us flavors and aromas. Now, hops are very varietal. There are dozens and dozens of varieties, and some smell like lemons or oranges or flowers or whatever else. These may be a major component or not of the type of beer. We then add the yeast. The yeast consumes the sugar, gives off the carbon dioxide, the alcohol, and also a number of flavors that we associate with beer. So we, in the brew house, technically speaking, create wort, and then the yeast creates beer. And it is at the point where you add the yeast that you decide, will it be a lager or an ale? Ales are warm fermenting and rapid fermentations, don't sometimes need long aging. Lagers are long, slow, cold fermentations by a completely different species of yeast. So at every stage of the process, there is another opportunity to determine what this is going to be. And it's much more complicated than making wine, at least in any traditional sense. And it actually bears a greater resemblance to cooking than it does to winemaking. Winemaking is relatively simple. Brewing isn't.